how to really begin to address parents in terms of what it's like when your child does not fall in the normal, typical bandwidth of
Right,
what people are dealing with at home in
right,
the parenting
right.
world.
Yeah. So outside of that bell curve, right? So something that's kind of, yeah, not what you expected, not what you read about in parenting books, not what you saw in your friends and neighbors and family members and their parenting journey. You're sort of like, what did I sign up for? This isn't what I signed up for. This is taking a whole other path that is completely foreign to me. And I think that a lot of parents find themselves in that space and really, have a high level of desperation, but also wondering, what have I done? Right? Kind of wondering if everyone else has such a different experience, it must be me. And, unfortunately, sometimes that messaging is even reinforced in the help that they then, seek out. But,
Yeah, and they get
you and
lots
I
of
are aware of
messages.
these kids that really have very different neurobiology that the paradigm is totally different.
Yeah, and they get a lot of messages. You were doing it wrong. You should be doing it this way. You should be holding more
Mhm.
consequences. You should be doing it that way. That
Right.
your expectations are too demanding.
Mhm.
And I think we really need to nod to the fact that our profession is siloed, and you're going to get
Mhm.
information based on the orientation and the perspective of the
Mhm.
provider.
Right. Yep. And we have to own that. And, clinicians do well to have clinical humility, meaning,
Mhm.
yes, you know what you know, but you're also aware that you don't know it all, right? And that, you're approaching the work with a family or a parent or a child with that collaborative curiosity, right? You want to be open to the information you are going to learn as a provider, as a
Yeah,
professional, based on that family's lived experience, that you don't
exactly.
hold all of these answers at the outset, or maybe ever even. It's always this collaborative process
Yeah.
driven by curiosity. Why might that be? What was that trigger? What was happening in that nervous system, right? That those are some of the questions that are really, pushing you and guiding you in, again, this collaborative partnership with families.
Yeah, it's really that curiosity about what is the function of that behavior? Why is that showing up now in this particular set of circumstances? And I
Mhm.
think that's the kind of questioning that many parents don't get a lot of support to explore because
Mhm.
kids are supposed to be compliant, kids are supposed to follow the rules, right? And
Mhm.
I think
Mhm.
parents feel like they're on an island. They're really
Right,
alone.
right. Yeah. And so, I think it's a beautiful thing. There's this, parenting community online and social media spaces that has really fulfilled a need that, professionals have missed, I think, again, with good intentions, but unfortunately, that siloed approach, like you speak of, and that um, sort of being too steeped in maybe one philosophical orientation and not sort of being able to kind of look outside and think about match, right? Is that modality, is that intervention truly a match for that individual child? Right. So kind of getting beyond the one size fits all. Oh, this is anxiety. This is what you do. Well, anxiety comes in about 32 flavors, right? Or more. Um,
Oh, gosh.
and so we need to be really just, I think, much more nuanced.
I love that. I think that's exactly right. We have to be much more nuanced. And I often find this is such a growthful experience for parents, but also parents get so overwhelmed and overloaded because none of this was
Mhm.
elaborated for them. None of it was named for them. They don't know that about themselves, and they're operating from a place of really wonderful intention,
Mhm.
but their map doesn't include these kinds of
Mhm.
intricacies.
Right, right. Yeah. And so I think that, maybe it's helpful for us to talk about the type of support or work that I ideally think about that would be helpful, because I think we've kind of highlighted that what's out there maybe is missing the mark. So let's put our heads together and think about what could be better. What could be that ideal? And again, it's not going to be a one size fits all. It's going to be nuanced, but what are some of the components or some of the things that you and I think are most applicable in these, my parenting journey doesn't look like anyone else's path.
Yeah, and I think it's really a clash between my desire as a parent to show up, to help my child be happy,
Hmm.
successful, to enjoy my child, to have my child be warm and loving and trusting of us.
Hmm.
And then these rules and the structure and the expectations and the demands. And I don't have tools in my toolbox and I don't know what to do. I often think this is what I'm hearing from parents. Is
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
kind of the sense you get as well?
Yes, I definitely get that sense. Not having the tools, feeling like I've tried it all and nothing's really, landed. Maybe something will work for a day or two, but then it sort
Yes.
of doesn't. Now what? And so I think that is a common experience. And I think, these messages, these shoulds, right? What you should do as a parent, I think are echoed throughout,
Yeah.
our society. So, school systems reinforce it, our neighbors, our friends, our spiritual communities, our even our
Parents.
yeah, our own parents, our work institutions sort of have, the grown-up version of a lot of these shoulds that we're hearing, as employees and workers. So, I think the parallels kind of run throughout, which make it even harder to step outside it or even see
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
bind that we're in.
Yeah, it's kind of like the water you swim in, you don't see it because it's
Don't see
so
it,
ubiquitous.
right?
So, I lean into the idea of connect, reflect, and act. The idea of
Mhm.
really, you've mentioned curiosity. It's really about
Mhm.
validating, acknowledging, bringing compassion to what is, and then
Mhm.
noticing how your system is operating on
Mhm.
multiple levels. So, with that as a framework, I always think that parents' regulation often gets lost in the mix because we
Mhm.
talk about
Mhm.
self-care,
Mhm. Mhm.
but self-care when your child is aggressive or your child is screaming all the time,
Right.
it's a different animal. What are your thoughts
Really
on that?
different. Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think we sort of often start with the premise of like the parent is regulated and now we just have to work on the child, right? And that is not the case because parents aren't robots, they are humans. They are reacting as they should, as their bodies and brains of course would,
Yes.
to what is going on in their living room, in their
Yeah.
kitchen, in their car. And so I think you're absolutely right that we kind of gloss over
Yeah.
the parent's nervous system. And we might sort of give a nod to, oh, that must be hard for that parent, or wow, that's a lot for that parent. But, often it's not any more curious than that about what are the specific sensory triggers for that parent? What are the
Yes.
tools for that parent to mitigate, let's say, that sensory trigger? What are the emotional, triggers that are going on that might
Yes.
be parallels from their own childhood or
Yes.
other relationships that have been, challenging, right? So these pieces are part of the parents, neurobiology, part of their experience. And I almost see them as like little landmines, right? That are kind of there. They're hidden, they're underneath the surface. Um, and, sometimes our kiddos step on one, right? And we really feel it deeply. And that's where we, might lose it as parents ourselves. And those aren't moments that we're, you know, proud of or want to announce or share, but they are common. They
Yes,
are
they are.
what happened to good parents. I try to tell
Yes.
that to families all the time. Just because you've messed up, just because you've lost it, does not make you a bad parent. In fact, the fact that you're asking that question and wondering about it and thinking about the impact
Yep.
shows me that you are a good parent with a nervous system that got
Yep.
overloaded.
Yeah, it's